Mask of a Diva, a Stan Kraychik mystery, Book 4, 1994. Author, Grant Michaels. Publisher, St. Martin's Press, New York. Author, Eric Aust. For all the divas, operatic and otherwise. Chapter 21. After Lieutenant Branco left, I went upstairs. I wanted to see Bruce David myself, and since Daphne was still up there with him, I'd have a chance to talk to her as well. I stopped outside what I thought was Bruce's room and knocked on the door. From within, I heard a male voice call out, "Avante!" I opened the door and immediately realized that I'd mistakenly stopped at Maestro Toscanelli's room instead. The maestro was sitting near an open window in the distance. Outside the window was the Atlantic Ocean, often dark and moody, but at that moment rolling lazily under the early evening sky. In one hand, the maestro held a lit cigarette, and in the other, a small tumbler half full of whiskey. He turned his head to me and said, "Signor Ragazzo." He gestured with his hand. "Come sit. Look at the water. How beautiful it is here in your country." I entered and took the armchair opposite him. He offered me a cigarette, and I was about to refuse, but then figured, why not? It might even be perceived as goodwill to smoke with the old man. I took a cigarette from the package he held out to me. I prepared to light it myself, but seemingly out of nowhere, the maestro produced and struck a match for me. Again, I wondered what had happened to the solid gold lighter he'd had the other day. He smiled as he held the match in front of my cigarette. "Finalmente, I light it for you," he said with a chuckle. I drew cautiously on the shaft to keep from inhaling the smoke and then coughing. Not exactly a show of manliness. "Where's your lighter?" I asked. He replied. "La fiammadora?" I fumbled in Italian. He chuckled and corrected me. "La accendino d'oro." Then he flushed with sudden embarrassment and muttered, "I pardemuto." Then he smiled and said quickly, "Whiskey?" I agreed, and he poured me some from the nearby liquor cart. The social niceties completed, it was time to improvise some commerce. "Maestro," I said, "when you spoke with the police just now, you said that this opera festival would probably be the last time you would ever conduct an opera again. Why is that?" The old man nodded. "For me soon it will be finito." "But you still have so much energy." "Oh, no." He waved his hand in front of himself. "I am tired now. When I was a young man, I had much fire in my blood, but now it is only smoke." He looked at his cigarette and chuckled as though he had made a joke. "Why did you decide to make your last appearance with Madama Ostinata?" He made a slight shrug. "I know Marcella for many, many years. I know there will be trouble. Marcella always makes trouble, but there will be no surprise." "Except for a couple of bodies," I thought. I said, "So it was for old time's sake?" "Huh?" "I mean, you chose Marcella because you were old friends." The maestro made a vague but said nothing. "But why would you conduct your final production in America instead of Italy?" "I did not want," said the old man. "It is my last opera, but it is the first time I have the chance to come to America. Finally, they will know who is Toscanelli, and this lovely woman, Miss Davenport. She pays for everything and makes our travel molto lussuoso. Very much luxury, so how can I refuse?" "Have you been to the States before?" "Never," he said sharply. "That's surprising, especially for someone of your stature." At least, I assumed the maestro had stature. I wasn't much of an opera buff, so I didn't really know. "It's too bad your first trip here turned out like this." "Huh?" he said again. "I mean with Madama Ostinata's death." Yes." Then the maestro shook his head despondently. I cannot understand who could do such a thing. Marcella was a difficult woman, but she was an artiste. In Europe, it can never happen like that. That a great artiste is killed like a dog. He sat quietly as the smoke curled gracefully upwards from our 2 cigarettes. Outside the window, the night sky was fast consuming the last reflected rays of sunlight, making the ocean barely visible. I confessed to the maestro that I was an aficionado of opera, but that since I'd met him in person, I looked forward to collecting his recordings. He said, "Non est possible." I know, I said. They're very difficult to find in this country, but I'm going to Europe soon and I'll find them there. No, he said, shaking his head emphatically. There is no recording. I never make one. No? Never. But why not? Who knows, he said. Then he made a cynical little shrug. Perhaps, before I die, some big American company will ask me to make a contract. And then at last I will record every opera of the great Verdi. He punctuated his fantasy with a fey wink. I countered. But aren't most of the big recording companies based in Europe, especially for opera? Yes, he whispered with a defeated nod. That is true. And I realized that despite the maestro's so-called stature, perhaps he had never been invited to make a recording. There was a knock on the door. Avante, said the maestro, his voice once again full of energy and life. Daphne entered, saw me sitting with the old man, and then exclaimed to me, You smoke? Sometimes, I said, cowering a bit. I wonder what other secrets you harbor. None, really, I said, but I sounded defensive. Not the best to tribute for a double secret agent. I extinguished the cigarette and recalled a similar guilt-ridden moment in my distant childhood, when I'd stayed overnight at my Aunt Letta's house, and the cool starched cotton sheets on the guest bed had caused a throbbing erection, and there was no way to conceal my pronged state when she came in to say good night to me. Daphne said, I was checking on Bruce next door, and I heard voices coming from the maestro's room, and here I find you both, chewing the fat and having a relaxed smoke before dinner, just like 2 confirmed bachelors. I was about to protest that I was married in a sense, although lately I hadn't been thinking much of my lover. Daphne continued, It's been a nightmare for me today, and I could use some pleasant company myself. Do you think we might move this little party downstairs to the library? Parker can serve cocktails, and perhaps we can chase away some of that horrid police energy from the room. I said, I thought you liked the lieutenant. Oh, I do, my dear. I like him very much, and it appears there's quite a bit of him to like too, but he certainly does bring a host of shadows with him. I never thought of it quite that way, I said. The maestro spoke up. El tenente. Yes, replied Daphne. I see, said the maestro. Un cavalier scolo. A dark knight, certainly, said Daphne. It seems we're all smitten with him. And then she released a cascade of laughter like a flirtatious diva trolling about the joys of love. I'd better go wash for dinner, I said flatly. You can use the washroom at the end of the hall, dear. I left Daphne and the maestro to compare notes on the Dark Knight. As Branco's deputy, I'd already learned that indulging their frivolous emotions would only impair my duties to him, and who would I have to answer to but the Dark Knight himself? Next door to the maestro's quarters was Bruce. David's suite. I opened his door quietly just to peek in on him. I called his name, but got no answer, so I entered the bedroom and tiptoed to his bedside. Bruce was sound asleep, breathing deeply and regularly. The sedative Daphne had given him was doing its job well. Bruce looked almost cherubic, lying there under the covers. As I left the room, I reminded myself to ask Daphne what she'd used on him. You never know when you might want to turn someone into a cherub. On the way to the washroom, I also passed the top landing of the staircase in the late Marcella Ostenata's chambers. Those rooms were still sealed off by the police, but coming from behind the next door, along the hall, a door that was partially ajar, I overheard a female voice humming an operatic aria. The music was unfamiliar, but the voice was agile and resonant. I stopped outside the door to listen. It was a soprano, and she seemed to be moving around the room with fluidity, as her voice did around the notes she was singing. Was there another singer staying at Daphne's house whom I hadn't met yet? My question was answered when the voice approached close to the door, and then suddenly the door flew open away from my face. "Aye!" squealed Mathilda, and she dropped the stack of folded garments she'd been holding. I guess finding me outside the door had shocked her, and she was speechless for a moment. I said, "You have a lovely voice." "Oh," she said as she tried to collect herself. "I did not know you were there. I would not, I didn't know you could sing." Mathilda smiled awkwardly, then stooped down to pick up the clothing she had dropped. "I do not sing for others," she said. "With a voice like that, why not?" "Oh, no, no," she said, "never." "That's too bad," I said, and I thought how strange it was that the servant of a great diva should have a more pleasing voice, at least for the pedestrian world, than the larger-than-life woman who'd had the great career. I knelt down to help Mathilda pick up the things on the floor. I noticed among the clothes a pair of men's pants made of tropical weight worsted wool. I reached for them, but Mathilda quickly grabbed them up before I could get them. "Noel," she said, "please." She pushed the pants under the clothes already in her arms and concealed them. Then she said, "Some things are very personal here." I apologized to her, then said, "Did you ever sing on stage?" Her tired but weary eyes glanced nervously at me. "Why do you ask me this?" she said. "What does it matter how I sing, or where I sing, or if I ever sing again? Who is asking this?" "I was just curious," I said. "Your voice surprised me, that's all." Mathilda and I stood up together, and I handed her the few items she'd allowed me to refold myself. "Thank you," she said. "You pretend very well to be kind. Most people do not understand. Sometimes that is important." "Apparently, I've really offended you. I'm sorry." "No," said Mathilda. "I am not offended. No one can offend me. My soul has been covered with so many scars now. They are all joined together like leather. Even a knife cannot penetrate my soul. Perhaps some person did cut Madama's neck and kill her, but nothing can hurt me. No one can hurt me now." "Did Madama Ostinata know that you could sing?" Mathilda's eyes flashed full of hatred. "Of course she knew. That is what attracted her to me at the beginning. I was a poor girl, a servant in a villa. Marcella was a guest there, and she heard me singing as I did my work. That is when she decided to save me. But in her heart, Marcella wanted only to silence me, to kill my voice. If I had the chance, I would be the prima donna assoluta." Did I dare tell Mathilda that her life was a cliché? She went on. "How many years I took care of her, all that traveling, the cities, the hotels, the theaters. Countless admirers, countless liaisons. Always a scandal. Then the critics, the impresarios, the other singers, the ailments, the complaints. Thank God it is finished. Perhaps now I will have some small life of my own." "And what will you do?" I said. A wan little smile appeared on her face. "I know she will leave me nothing. She thought only of herself, so I will write a book and tell the world the truth about Marcella Ostinata. I will become rich, finally, from her disgusting life." I couldn't ask what I was thinking. Will anyone care? Instead, I said, "What will you do then?" "Then," said Mathilda, "then I will... Apparently, she hadn't quite planned what she was going to do with the avalanche of money from her torrid bestseller. Maybe you can sing, I offered. After all, many careers in the arts were subsidized to the point of critical acclaim when talent alone proved insufficient. Perhaps, she said faintly. There's still time, I said, but you have to write it first. Yes, she said, I must write it all someday. Don't wait too long. No, said Mathilda, I will do it soon. It will be like a confession, and I will be free when every black deed of the great Marcella Ostinata has been told. With that, she closed the door. I continued to the washroom, washed my hands and face, and then went downstairs for cocktails before dinner. Daphne greeted me in the library. Before the maestro joins us, she said, I want to thank you for saving my skin this afternoon. You're welcome, I said, but what did I do? It's what you didn't do, my dear. Or more precisely, what you didn't say. You very generously neglected to tell the lieutenant about my little disagreement I'd had with Madame Ostinata regarding my brooch, the one that showed up on her dress a few days ago. Well, I said, there really wasn't any choice. I'm not a snitch, not when friends are involved, but you should know that Mathilda did mention the brooch to the cops. Implicating me? Not exactly. She just announced in a general accusatory way that the brooch was missing from Marcella's jewelry box. Daphne said, That's too bad. I can't very well claim it as my own now, can I? I was wondering if you already had. You mean with the police? I mean with your hands. Daphne chortled. My dear, what do you take me for? I only meant... Why was my face suddenly burning? I only meant that the brooch was rightfully yours to take back if you had wanted to. Of course it was, Daphne said with another loud laugh. Those are my sentiments exactly, my dear. I think you may be playing your role of deputy far too seriously. That's when the maestro entered, and for the rest of the evening, throughout cocktails and dinner, just for a change of pace, we avoided all talk of murder and the police and spoke only of pleasant things like music and the glorious old days of opera. And the maestro, favorite from another era, Celestina Boninsegna. Polite conversation was always a heady challenge for me, but that evening I faced the task squarely. After dinner, I once again considered calling Rafik in Paris, but what would I have to tell him about except for another dead body and the return of Lieutenant Branco into the sphere of my life? And the fact that I loved him, and given half a moment's peace, that I even missed him. Well, I did finally surrender to my destiny and called Paris that night. But as my destiny would decree, there was no answer at the number Rafik had given to me. So then I wondered, where in the hell is he? A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.